Tonight, after 12 days of testimony, the jury is back with recommendations at the inquest into the mass stabbing at James Smith Cree Nation and Weldon. Also, a change in plea for the man accused in a hospital cafeteria stabbing death 2 years ago. Plus, a Regina man is looking for accessible transit service and is ready to file a human rights complaint against the city of Regina.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Wednesday, January 31st, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thank you for watching. We begin tonight in the city of Melfort. For the last several weeks, an inquest there has been examining what happened in September of 2022 when Miles Sanderson went on a stabbing massacre that killed 11 people and wounded more than a dozen others at James Smith Cree Nation and nearby Weldon. Yesterday, the jury at the inquest was charged with their instructions to determine the facts around the deaths and consider making recommendations. Today, they're back, and that's where we find our Kendall Latimer, who joins us now. Kendall, take us through what's going on right now.
Well, Sam, people started gathering back at the center here in Melfort around 4 o'clock when word got out that the jury had finished their deliberations, and they spoke to the public around 5. Now, before the jury had released their recommendations to the public, they focused on the 11 victims first. Their first task was to confirm the identities of the victims, and they did just that. Gregory Burns and his mom, Bonnie, Carol Burns, Gloria Burns, Earl Burns Sr., Thomas Burns, Christian and Lana Head, Wesley Peterson of Weldon, Robert Sanderson, and Damien Sanderson. The jury also determined the place, time, and manner and cause of death for these victims. Now, once that was over, they moved on to their recommendations with the goal of how to prevent similar deaths in the future. Now, Sam, there was a lot, close to 30. I'll read some of them for you here. They range. There's recommendations for folks in custody with corrections. They say more consistency and programming is needed for inmates who are behind bars. More elder support is also needed for those inmates. As for offenders who are released from prison and considered at large, they say more needs to be done by parole officers to find those folks who are at large. As for James Smith Cree Nation, the jury recommended more local programming be considered for things like addictions, domestic violence, and parenting, and that this be offered to all members on the First Nation. And the jury also recommended that James Smith Cree Nation continue to establish its own police force while bolstering its security team. Now that work is underway. And Sam, also, the coroner made close to 15 recommendations himself, and these were for various groups as well. The RCMP, James Smith Cree Nation Leadership, Corrections. Again, I can't list them all for you, but he really offered guidance on how to improve community safety on the First Nation, as well as what corrections and RCMP could do considering staffing issues or policy issues. Again, all in the mind to prevent similar deaths in the future. The coroner, Sam, says that he knows that this was an impossible tragedy for people to go through, and this inquest has been just as emotional and just as hard for folks to rehear, to relearn, or learn for the first time all of this evidence. And he really hopes that people and agencies will take heed to these recommendations so positive change can come out of such a devastating tragedy.
Kendall, thanks so much for taking a moment to share this with us. I know you have to get back and chat with some of the families. Thanks so much for this tonight. The
Thanks,
CBC's
Sam.
Kendall Latimer live in Melfort tonight. You can read more about this story as it develops at cbc.ca/sask. One person was taken to hospital after the partial collapse of a building in Saskatoon this afternoon. Police, fire and emergency responders were at the scene. Occupational health and other agencies were also on hand to assess the damage. According to a City of Saskatoon statement, a portion of the 5th floor partially collapsed on a building under construction in the Aspen Ridge neighborhood. One person was taken to hospital with injuries but should be okay. Initial information indicates concrete slabs were being installed for flooring when it collapsed. One person had to be rescued from the roof. There was a dramatic twist in a Saskatoon courtroom this morning. A man on day 3 of his murder trial changed his plea to guilty. Kevin Wichican now admits he murdered Randy Beauchesne with a screwdriver. It happened 2 years ago in a hospital cafeteria. Dan Zakreski brings us the story.
The attack was brutal, unprovoked, and over in seconds. That's Kevin Wichican in the white jersey assaulting Randy Beauchesne. The full video was played in court, but we stopped it before the actual stabbing. Wichican stabbed Beauchesne 3 times in the head with a screwdriver. Now, the 55-year-old was at the hospital with his daughter for an appointment. He never left the intensive care unit after the attack. He was taken off life support 2 months later. Wichican was charged with second-degree murder. His trial began Monday with a voir dire, or a trial within a trial. The judge wanted to assess whether Wichican's statements to police were voluntary. But this morning, Wichican changed his plea to guilty of second-degree murder. The lawyers will be back tomorrow to make a joint sentencing submission. Second-degree murder is an automatic life sentence. They'll be recommending that Wichican not be eligible for parole for at least 10 years. Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Moose Jaw Police confirm a Saskatchewan MLA is facing 2 charges in connection with an alleged assault last year, and the opposition has questions.
Today, what we're asking from the Premier is, when was he made aware of these concerns? He or his staff made aware of these concerns? What did he know when? And what further details can he provide the people of this province?
Greg Lawrence is charged with assault and assault by choking after an incident last June. The 58-year-old stepped down from the Saskatchewan Party caucus yesterday. He served as an MLA for Moose Jaw-Waccamaw since 2011. Late last year, he announced he won't be seeking re-election. In a statement, Premier Moe says he's deeply concerned about the nature of the charges. Lawrence will sit as an independent MLA when the Legislative Assembly returns in early March. His first court appearance on the assault charges is March 18th. Many agree that there is room for improvement when it comes to Regina Transit. But what about people who rely on accessible services? As Alexander Kwan reports, many tell us their need is even greater.
It's hard when you get mistreated every day.
Jamie McKenzie is frustrated. He relies on Regina Transit as one of the few ways he can get around the city, and he's threatening to file a human rights complaint if things don't get better.
You live like that, knowing that you might have to be stuck taking a city bus because you can't get a taxi, and the sidewalks aren't clean, and stuff like that. People don't have to live that like that every day. I do, because I'm in a chair.
Right now, if someone has a disability and doesn't have private transportation, there are 3 options. Conventional city transit, which is now better equipped to accommodate people with a disability, paratransit, a shared ride, door-to-door service that has to be booked ahead of time, and an accessible taxi program, which relies on specially equipped taxis operated by a private company. That last component is one of the most important, but it remains one of the only ones outside of the city's control. Only 8 of the 18 accessible taxi licenses are being used right now, and the city says demand is higher than ever. McKenzie says bus service is too slow and unreliable, but taxi service is inconsistent. So what's a man to do? City staff say they have a solution. They've proposed a city-operated dispatch service.
You might have to phone several accessible taxi companies to try to track down an accessible taxi company that could do your trip for you. If it were all centralized in one place, you obviously would be able to just make that one phone call.
City staff also want to see a mobile app so users don't have to rely on people to book a ride. Longtime accessible transit user Aaron Murphy wants that too. He says there is room for improvement, but acknowledges the current system gives him freedom he wouldn't have otherwise.
You hate it for the reasons you love it.
McKenzie says he's all in on the new service, but Regina City Council has repeatedly delayed making a decision, asking for more reports and more information. The latest delay comes from the discussion about a 25-cent surcharge on each taxi ride. Yes, just 25 cents. That surcharge is meant to help pay for the new service and incentivize taxi drivers.
Guys, you're going to have a human rights complaint that's going to cost you more than you ever want, because human rights will want changes now.
The next report doesn't come back to City Council until March. That'll be 10 months after this solution was first proposed to elected officials. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
Saskatoon City Council is looking for a private partner to run the proposed downtown event and entertainment district. The recommendation from administration says bringing in a private company will reduce the overall funding needed from other sources. Mayor Charlie Clark says event centres across North America have private partners playing a significant role, in some cases providing up to $200 million in capital and sharing the risk of operations. Last month, executive committee debate got lively, discussing if a private company coming in should have to pay a living wage to its staff there.
I obviously want to promote and develop as much of a good living wage and good jobs in our city, and we'll be making sure that that's part of the discussion. But to try to tie it in as a requirement at this early stage of the negotiations, because there would be so many unanswered questions as to what that potentially would mean, we didn't support making it a mandatory element at this phase.
Clark says council is asking potential partners to include what their strategy might look like, with a goal of making sure good and sustainable jobs are created through the project. In Regina, City Council is one step closer to accessing $36 million from the federal government. The money is part of Ottawa's Housing Accelerator Fund. It's a grant program meant to boost housing supply among issues over rising costs and housing shortages. Today, Council unanimously passed a series of development bylaws. They'll allow more units to be built in any lot in the city and remove a requirement for parking minimums. The news is welcomed by the development community, and experts in the field of city planning say this will help the city prepare for the future. Well, you know, with this lovely weather, it's easy to get excited about camping season. Reservations for provincial parks open up April 1st for seasonal sites. April 2nd to 9th is when nightly, Camp Easy, and group sites are up for grabs. The parks are staggered, so it's best to check in advance when your park opens up. Reservations go live online at 7 a.m. each day. We'll be back after the break.
This weather update is brought to you by Crestview Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, proud member of the Capital Automotive Group.
Our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now. And Ethan, I'm so sad. Someone built little snow ducks out front of our broadcast center, and Mother Nature took them away.
Yeah, that happened pretty quickly. I think with the warm weather really kicking into high gear again, we did see records fall across the province the day before. Yesterday, likely going to break some again today. We told you yesterday, of course, about this record out in Maple Creek. Pretty remarkable. That's the warmest temperature that we've seen in Saskatchewan in the month of January. But these other locations that you see here in orange, in red, and yellow, those are locations that hit all-time January records themselves, including Swift Current and Watrous, Weyburn, just to name a few, well into the double digits in a lot of these places. These are locations that did not get our warmest January temperature on record, but broke daily temperature records yesterday, including Regina, smashing the old record and getting actually within 0.1 degree of our all-time January high temperature. Very warm in the Cypress Hills, and temperature records as well throughout really all the province, from Waskesiu to Kindersley to Estevan, where a lot of these locations are still right now reporting temperatures well into the single digits, still at the double-digit territory in southwestern Saskatchewan. No surprise there with how warm it's been, although didn't get to 21 degrees today again in Maple Creek. And of course, this warm air taking a bite out of our snowpack, as you can see through south central and southwestern, west central Saskatchewan over these next few days here. You start to see that snow line recede a bit more and more each and every day. Even northern Saskatchewan, we're starting to see that drop off a bit, and that's coming very close to Regina and Saskatoon, and we're not really looking for anything in the way of precipitation over these next few days here. Still sunny tomorrow as high pressure lingers through much of the province. We're finally going to see some clearing in northern Saskatchewan as well. And even as we get into Friday, still cloud free for the most part, but it's Saturday when we start to see that build in a little bit, and a small system making its way through western and northern sections of the province, and of course still warm at the surface and a bit aloft as well. So we're going to see some mixing in there, potentially some freezing rain and a little bit of snow. And with the snow melting, adding the moisture to the air, and with temperatures dropping tonight, especially in eastern sections of the province, we could see visibility near zero at times again, especially closer to the Manitoba border. That could linger at times today, just kind of depending on where we see that fog pop up here and there. What might help a little bit is we are seeing winds pick up a bit overnight, so that could stir up the atmosphere a little bit and help dissipate that fog. I think things tomorrow afternoon for much of south and central will be a little bit gusty at times, maybe 40 to 50 kilometers an hour, and a similar picture as we head into Friday. In terms of temperatures, upper single digits for Regina these next couple of days with the sunshine and a little bit of wind. And then things starting to progressively get a little bit colder from there, but not by very much. Sunday is when we see the return to those mostly cloudy conditions and maybe a little bit of some snow flurries as we head into start the week next week. And Saskatoon, we see very nice temperatures well above seasonal for you here as we get into Thursday, Friday. And that cool down a little bit more progressive for you as we see possibly a return to minus double-digit overnight temperatures. So Sam, we have +7 over here, -7 over here. We're going for a bit of a ride on temperature-wise.
-10 is still not cold.
No, seasonal, actually.
Ridiculous. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
It's going to be fun. I can't even remember the last time we were on the ice, to tell you the truth. So it might have been when we were playing for Usher at some point. But yeah, it's exciting. Anytime I get to come back to Regina or Saskatoon and come and be a part of something like this, and especially to experience it with Chris, it's going to be a blast out there.
On Saturday, Stanley Cup champion Ryan Getzlaf and his big brother, former Saskatchewan Rough Rider Chris, will lace up their skates for charity. The second annual Saskatchewan Rough Rider Foundation Winter Classic will drop the puck in Saskatoon this weekend. The lineup will feature current and past rider greats and other celebrity guests. The Getzlaf brothers will play on the same team, but say they won't know their full roster until the night before. Game time is 12:30 at Merlish Belcher Place. If you want to watch, tickets are $25 for everyone 13 and up. Kids 12 and under are free. We'll be back after the break. The government has paused expanding medical assistance in dying, or MAID, to cover people whose sole reason is their mental health. Christine Birak has more on the impact.
For some Canadians, the decision is isolating and an unjust betrayal.
Somebody is making a choice with my life, whether or not they know it.
Unlike almost all other severely ill patients who can request medical assistance in dying, or MAID, health officials announced Canadians suffering from debilitating mental illness legally still cannot.
Let me be very clear. We need more time.
It's an unthinkable scenario for most, but what's next for Canadians who might have been waiting for the option to die?
People are tired of treatment and want an end to this suffering.
Right now, even Canadian doctors are divided.
I wouldn't say that I have advice. I would hope that they could keep trying. And I think that there are many interventions.
If a person has been under treatment for 30 years and is still sick, to me, that's pretty self-evident that their condition is not treatable.
It's incredibly painful to live without connections.
44-year-old Agatha Gowron lives in Regina. She suffered from depression since the age of 13, along with anorexia and bulimia. No treatment has meaningfully worked. All she wants now is compassion and acceptance.
I really wish that people would understand that some individuals are okay with not wanting to be helped and don't expect it, but would like to have control over their life and how they leave or what they leave behind.
Gowron says she doesn't want to take her own life. She wouldn't want someone to find her and feel guilty about what they did or didn't do. She'd hoped MAID could offer a more dignified ending.
I feel honestly like I'm running a marathon and somebody keeps moving the finish line.
It has been a long road. Currently, medical assistance in dying has 2 tracks. First legalized in 2016 with safeguards, Track 1 refers to a request for MAID by a person whose death is reasonably foreseeable. In 2021, MAID expanded to include Track 2, requests made by a person whose natural death is not reasonably foreseeable but are suffering from grievous and irremediable conditions. Additional safeguards include a minimum 90-day assessment period, expert consultation, at least 2 medical assessments, and information is offered on available ways to alleviate suffering. Patients suffering from mental illness alone are not allowed on either track.
The vulnerable are very much underrepresented.
Retired psychiatrist Derek Smith says this is about politics, not patients.
This idea that we're protecting people is spurious. These people do not need protection. They are competent Canadians who can make a decision themselves.
The number of reported MAID deaths in Canada has seen a steady increase, going from just over 1,000 in 2016 to over 13,000 in 2022. Access to MAID for individuals whose deaths were not reasonably foreseeable beginning in 2021 accounted for less than 3.5% of patients.
We don't have a special category for stroke victims or kidney disease or cancer or anything like that. We have a special group for mental illness. And that, to me, is evidence of the ongoing stigma that psychiatric patients face over their entire life.
I'm not ideologically opposed to MAID for mental disorders.
Dr. Madeline Lee is a MAID assessor and provider. She feels the delay is a chance to develop more detailed criteria for assessing patients and why they want MAID.
The challenge is that the criteria in the legislation actually lack specificity, and they are open to interpretation by MAID practitioners.
Gowron says it's difficult for most people to understand her suffering over the past decades, but she knows she wants it to end.
I know that my condition can't be cured, and I've come to terms with that. I don't want to be helped anymore. I don't want to become somebody's pet project or somebody's experiment trying to fix me.
Outside of court challenges or traveling to a country where MAID for mental health is legal, Gowron feels condemned to a life she can hardly bear for years to come.
The woman seeking a medically assisted death says the government's delay only prolongs her anguish. You saw that in Christine Birak's story. Government sources say no expansion of MAID will happen before 2025. And Ethan is back with one last look at your weather.
Yeah, very warm still. No surprise there in Regina at midnight, still at the freezing mark. And we could see a little bit of fog develop at times overnight, and that could still be lingering a little bit tomorrow morning as well. But otherwise, seeing mostly sunny skies. We're dropping a bit below freezing, but of course we jump right in front of the freezing mark pretty much in the morning hours. And by the time we get to the noon hour, winds picking up a little bit from the southeast. We could see those gusting upwards of 50 kilometers an hour tomorrow. Saskatoon, not as much of a chance for fog for you, still sitting around 1 degree at midnight. Clouds clearing away for the morning, temperature not going anywhere. Those southeast winds also picking up a little bit as we head into the afternoon. Not quite as strong as we're seeing in Regina. 5 degrees the high, Sam, but hey, we might get above that once again tomorrow.
This is the weirdest end to January ever. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime or more on what happened at the inquest at James Smith Cree Nation, head to cbc.ca/sask. You can also follow our YouTube channel or download the CBC News app. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.